So also the question is, have you ever wondered that why the pipes, or say where the flow happens, in most of the cases, the shape is circular? Why the drainage pipes, or say, or household pipes and all these things are circular, not say rectangular cross section? What do you think? Or if you know the answer, did you get the question? For liquid transport or even fluid gas transport, why the pipes or the tubes are usually circular in cross section?
Because to eliminate the discontinuity stresses.
And what it happens? I mean, what it does basically? That discontinuous stresses, what it does? See, stress means you can directly relate that with the pressure. So the
Pressure
amount of,
is yeah,
yeah, so the amount of
pressure is
pressure
equally
difference.
distributed over in the pipe.
So the point is the amount of pressure difference that it can handle a circular pipe of a fixed radius, of a fixed surface area, okay, is much higher than that of any other cross section. And also, in addition to that, say when you have a fixed surface area, okay, and you are asked to make a transportation pipe of different cross-sectional area, and you check that when the heat transfer in, or in which case the heat transfer is maximum with less amount of pressure drop, because one thing you can understand that we have objective of enhancing heat transfer, okay, uh, for the sake of this study. That in this context, what we are looking for, in some cases, we want to enhance or say lower the heat transfer. You know, typically, the objective is to enhance the heat transfer rate or the heat transfer. Fine. So now, in order to do that, always, if you have seen that we have related the heat transfer with the hydrodynamics, because as those drag coefficients and the convective transfer coefficients, those are directly related, the friction and the heat transfer. So once you try to enhance the heat transfer aspect, what happens? Your requirement for flowing the effort in flowing the flow, which in other words, we say the pumping cost of the flow, that also increases. The pumping cost, how it is estimated? It is estimated based on the pressure drop that will happen when the flow there in a pipe. In order to overcome that pressure drop, you have to continuously supply that energy so that flow can happen. Fine. So once you try to enhance the heat transfer rate, your pumping cost also increases. The energy input also increases. So the again coming back to the point that when you have a fixed surface area, you are given with a fixed surface area and you are asked to construct a transportation line, you would see that with a minimum pressure drop that translates to the minimum effort in driving the flow, okay, the heat transfer can be maximum or will be achieved maximum if the cross section is circular. But having said that, it is also true that in several cases, we also see the rectangular cross-sectional uh, transportation line. So can you remember where you have seen that? Any example of rectangular cross section where you have seen it is typically used in practical application? So the flow area is of a non-circular cross section. Can you think of such application or some area or where you have seen those? I'm pretty sure you have seen those. Anyone? Let me give you a hint. It is not transporting any liquid. In such cases, you have seen that.
No, sir, I think.
Ventilation systems.
Right. Right. Someone. So you have seen our Nalanda complex. You have been there, okay, in your first year, in fact, until the last March. So there, the central air conditioning, if you had noticed that the vent, that the duct we typically called, which is covered with the aluminum surface and all this insulation, those actually are made of, or those are actually is of rectangular cross section or rectangular flow area that we have. Now, do you remember those pictures of the classrooms where you had a vent that is coming out from the central exhaust system? So typically, you'd see this kind of heating or cooling purposes, or even in AC mall or in the central conditioning shopping malls or in central conditioning hotels, you would see that kind of a rectangular or maybe square cross-sectional duct. So now here the terminologies that we are mentioning. In one case, we are mentioning pipe. Okay, so say now a couple of terms that you are already aware, but let's have a summary of that. We say pipe, we say duct, okay, we say also tube. We also heard the term called conduit. Okay, so pipe we typically call when it is of circular cross section, and the cross section when it is very small, or say the pipe of smaller diameter, we call that as tube. Okay, and typically the pipes are used for the flow of a liquid phase, or when the fluid is liquid, usually. Okay, duct is of having rectangular cross-sectional flow area. Okay, so it is the kind, and particularly also any kind of say non-circular flow area that we define as the duct. Okay, and this is typically when the gas phase flows, the hot air, cold air, that kind of thing that flows. The fluid is usually of gas. Okay, so that means there are chances that you come across all these terms in the problem statement, but you have to be then careful, and sometimes the problem statement actually specify very clearly that a circular cross-section pipe to avoid any confusion. Okay, a rectangular duct having height and width. Okay, or a square duct having one side mentioned. The other benefit other means the possibly only benefit of using a duct is the simplistic construction approach. Okay, and the handling cost or the construction cost or fabrication cost is much cheaper than a circular pipe. So manufacturing and installation cost of duct is much lesser than a circular pipe. Okay, so now coming to the main content of today's lecture is that we have seen or we have understood several aspects of flow over a body, or say external flow. Now we will see today the flow through a pipe or duct or tube or conduit. Okay, so now we have a closed surface through which the flow is happening, and it is frequently encountered. Now, in most of your fluid mechanics class possibly was devoted on this aspect. So we will quickly recapitalize a couple of those concepts, okay, and then go to the main content of this section. Fine. So say you tell me when there is a flow, okay, there is a friction in between the fluid layers. Okay. Now, if that happens, generally what happens? Friction, when this friction increases or say friction imparts heat in the system. Fine. But when this happens without presence of any temperature difference, so we are not at all talking about any heating or cooling system, or simple flow is happening in atmospheric condition through a pipe. So have you encountered any heat increase or the say heat transfer phenomena in such cases, although there is friction in between fluid layers? There is basically no noticeable difference in the temperature of the fluid that is flowing inside the pipe, despite having frictional losses. Okay, so this friction in the pipe basically leads to the pressure drop, not the temperature rise of the fluid. But when the viscosity of the fluid is very high, then due to the friction between the fluid layers, we see certain increase or say the noticeable temperature increase in the fluid. Except those conditions, except those very critical exceptional conditions, the friction or the frictional losses doesn't impart on the heat transfer part. Okay, it's mainly influences, or it actually imparts as the pressure drop of the system. Fine. Now, the point is that usually when we consider the flow happening through a pipe or a duct, we consider that as one dimension. Okay, so because we consider the properties is not varying, or if it is varying, okay, it varies only in the direction of the flow, in this direction. So, and any cross-sectional area, we typically consider the properties are constant, or we define those properties as the bulk average of the fluid, or the average values of over that cross sections we consider as constant. But this assumption is valid typically when the flow has reached a steady state. Otherwise, that may also change. Fine. Now consider the flow enters a pipe. Okay. In the last section, what we have seen that when the flow was happening over a flat plate, the boundary layer developed. And because it has no limit, or it was not restricted, the fluid interface or the fluid surface, it grows exponentially. It can grow exponentially. But now here you have a finite wall. And that is why the flow is called the internal flow. The previous one was the external flow. So for this internal flow, what is the free stream value? Because here, whenever we calculated the Reynolds number, because eventually now our goal, you can understand that in other case, the external case, we always try to find out that what is the Reynolds number range, what is the Prandtl number range. We try to find a suitable relation to calculate the average Nusselt number. But now when we calculated Reynolds number in this case, we used a free stream velocity. Now here, what is that velocity? Because here, once it enters, now you understand the term, or you have possibly heard in fluid mechanics, called the no slip condition. That means once it enters, the fluid layer that is attached to the surface or that is adjacent to the surface immediately takes the velocity that is 0. And the velocity profile exists. So for example, this is a common velocity profile that you have seen for laminar case. It's a parabolic velocity profile. Okay. So here the velocity is 0 at the wall, and you had a maximum velocity at the center line, because once the velocity, some fluid enters the pipe, these velocities are 0 near the wall, and just above that wall, the velocity further reduces because of this layer-layer interaction. So which means at some point the velocity has to increase in order to cover those impedance due to the wall. Fine. So that means here we have to consider a velocity for calculation of Reynolds number that is in between, something between this 0 and this maximum velocity. And we call, or we know that velocity as the mean velocity. Okay, so based on that mean velocity, we usually calculate Reynolds number for the internal flow. Now, how do we calculate the mean velocity? Mean velocity comes from the concept of our mass conservation. That is the rho mean velocity when it is flowing through a cross section AC. We actually can write that rho V, which is a function of the radial direction and the axial direction, which is, if I say this is the x direction, velocity is a function of r and x, which is happening through a cross section of DAC, and we integrate it over the AC. So where we have, this is the mass flow rate. Rho is the density, AC is the cross-sectional area of flow, and this V, a function of Rx, is the velocity profile. Okay, so if the radius of this pipe where the incompressible flow is happening is say capital R, then what is the mean velocity? It is this numerator divided by rho AC, which is equals to, what should I write? 0 to R happening through a circular cross section. Rx 2 pi r dr divided by rho 2 pi r square.
Pi r square, sir.
Yeah, 2 pi r. Sorry, yeah, sorry. This is pi r square, not 2 pi r square. 2 comes when we have the differentiation here. Yeah, pi r square. So this is, if I simplify, this would be 2 by r square integration over 0 to r velocity profile, whatever that would be, which is a function of r and x, r dr. This would be our mean velocity. So that means if we know the velocity profile or the mass flow rate, we can calculate what would be the mean velocity. Fine. So this is a way out to find the velocity, mean velocity for the internal flow in order to calculate the Reynolds number. Okay. Now, similar to this understanding, now consider that a fluid that is coming in is being either heated or cooled. Okay. So the temperature of the fluid at any cross section, that would change from this surface temperature that is at the wall to some maximum or minimum depending on the situation to the center. So if that is being heated, we have a minimum temperature at the center line. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Right. Fine. So that means, so in that case also, when we try to find out the fluid property for the calculation, okay, so we have to define a mean temperature. It is useful to define a mean temperature so that we can find the fluid properties at that mean temperature and use it for further calculation, or mean or average temperature, whatever you can say that. Just like the mean velocity. But in this case, you should be aware that you can anticipate one thing, that this mean temperature will change along the flow direction. Whenever there is a heating or cooling incident. But the mean velocity will not. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Because what happens is that, so again, say let's think of the scenario. So if we try to use the conservation of energy principle, okay, to find out the mean. So the energy, so say the energy of the fluid, okay, is basically m dot Cp, the mean temperature, which is if I integrate it over this volume, the point we have Cp delta Cpt. Cpt, and we have say delta dot, which means for the cross sectional rho Cp T, then we have the Vmax and AC. Because m dot is the mass flow rate. So it is converted in terms of the volumetric flow rate multiplied by the cross-sectional area. And this cross-sectional area is varying, say, for 0 to R. So this thing, this m dot Cp Tm at any cross section, okay, actually represents the energy flow with the fluid. Okay, so that means the mean temperature is basically divided by m dot Cp, which is 0 to R Cpt rho v, the velocity, 2 pi r dr divided by rho, that is the v we have here, the v maximum, pi r square Cp. This is the complete m dot, the mass flow rate. This is equals to, this gives us 2 by the maximum for velocity, or the mean velocity, say here, the mean velocity, 0 to R. We have T, which is varying with R and X, and velocity, which is varying with R and X, R dr. So which means the mean temperature of the fluid will change during the heating or the cooling process and along the flow direction. So sometimes we also calculate the fluid properties of the internal flow based on the bulk mean temperature. The bulk mean temperature is usually the arithmetic average of the mean temperature that is at the inlet and the outlet. So the scenario is something like this. So the fluid is coming at an inlet temperature, okay, and going at an outlet temperature or exit temperature. So the bulk temperature of this, that we typically consider the mean at the inlet plus mean at the outlet or the exit divided by 2.
So, sir, is it temperature bulk or temperature mean both are same?
Sorry?
Temperature bulk and temperature mean, is both of them same? Are both of them same?
This is, see, when we have this is a further simplification of the problem of the understanding. Say there is a difference. Now you can understand the T mean is varying along the length of the flow or along the pipe. If this variation is significant, then at which temperature would you take the fluid properties for the sake of simplicity in calculation. This gives that parameter, that the bulk, that okay, whatever the mean temperature, say T mean is increasing linearly, something like this, and within this temperature range or the temperature difference, the fluid properties substantially changes. If that happens, then you can take the average temperature or the bulk fluid temperature by calculating the bulk temperature like this. Is it clear?
But sir, by that expression of T mean which you have written 2 by Vm by R square integration, if we would integrate it, then it will come out to be a constant.
The temperature of the fluid is changing, which is a function of R and X.
Yes, sir.
The velocity profile is also changing.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So the point is that you have, say, for a particular R, so for a particular, I mean, the point is that this here, whatever you are calculating, this is for a whole range.
Yes, sir. For the whole pipe length.
The whole pipeline, you get a say M value, a particular value M, Tm. Okay, so the point is that what you are trying to say, that I can take the fluid properties at that Tm itself.
Yes, sir.
Agreed. So here you can take that that value. But this is the other way of using a bulk value for calculating the properties or for estimating the properties.
Yes, sir.
So that means, like the average or the mean value of the velocity, we can calculate the mean temperature of the flowing fluid, that is flowing internally. And now coming to the question of calculating the Reynolds number once again. So the Reynolds number calculation, so for that we have seen that what is to be taken for the velocity. This is how we have calculated the mean velocity, mean fluid velocity. So Reynolds number is basically, we have rho V mean D by mu. So rho and mu are the fluid properties. So we basically write that as nu is the kinematic viscosity of the fluid. So this is known. Now what about D in case of non-circular cross section? This you know. Can you quickly tell me what would be D in case of say this kind of cross section, the square duct? If we have sides are A.
Under root 4 a square by pi.
Under root 4 a square by pi for a square duct.
We calculate generally by area.
So my first question is, what is the D called in such cases when there is non-circular cross section?
I forgot it.
Anyone? Anyone else? Bhavna? For such cases, would you call this as diameter or something else? Yes?
Hydraulic.
Hydrodynamic diameter.
No, not hydrodynamic. It's called the hydraulic. Hydraulic diameter. Which is written as a DH. The hydraulic diameter. Okay, the hydraulic diameter calculation involves is the weighted cross section divided by the weighted perimeter. Okay, the radius of that. So in this case, the D for this particular case, the hydraulic diameter is basically 4 times the cross section divided by the perimeter. Okay, so this is the generic definition, that 4 times weighted cross section divided by the weighted perimeter. Weighted means the perimeter that is weighted by the flowing fluid. Okay, so in this case, what will be the value then for the square duct? What is the weighted cross section?
A square.
A square. So 4A square. What is the weighted perimeter?
4A.
That means the hydraulic diameter for a square duct is the dimension of its one side or its side. So hydraulic diameter by this generic definition, for a circular pipe, it should be its diameter. That is what we are using in Reynolds number. So for a circular pipe, what would be the hydraulic diameter by this definition? What is the cross section that will be weight if a water is flowing like this? If you envisage the problem, pi d square by 4.
Yes, sir.
Agreed?
Yes, sir.
And the perimeter that
Pi.
will weight, right? That would be
Pi.
pi d, which boils down to simple d, and that is why we have always used d in the Reynolds number definition for a circular pipe. So this thing you must remember now, the hydraulic diameter and how it is calculated. So hydraulic radius would be quite naturally, it's also the 4 times the hydraulic radius is the hydraulic diameter. So now the point, we know that when there will be a laminar flow, when there will be a turbulent flow, and when there is transition flow. For internal flow, remember again, irrespective of this cross section, okay, the Reynolds number range is that 2300 or 2100, depend, because several textbooks will mention in different numbers in this range, the 2100 to 2300, this kind of value. So if this happens, the flow is laminar. That this we know. So when it is greater than 2300, but within 10,000, it is the transition. And when it is more than 10,000, we call this as turbulent. Fine. So these things should be very clear in your head. Now the point is that the development of the boundary layer, like we have seen when there was external flow. Now in case of, say, we have this kind of a circular pipe, the fluid is approaching or just coming inside this thing. So what will happen? Initially, just at the entrance, okay, we have a uniform velocity profile. Say, consider this section as just the outside of the pipe. So say the pipe starts from here. So in case of external flow, we consider this as the free stream velocity. But when it just hit the wall or the enclosures of this pipe, then what will happen? Like the concept of our boundary layer development, the boundary layer will be like this. But now since we have the walls on both the sides, okay, it would be suppressed. So two velocity boundary layers would merge after a certain distance from the entrance. This phenomena you have seen, right, in your fluid mechanics class, or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So because you have understood what is fully developed flow, it is that concept itself that I'm repeating here. So at the center line, this would merge at a distance from the inlet. Okay, if the flow is laminar or the turbulent, in both the cases. Now, this length, okay, till this portion, what do we call? We call hydrodynamic entrance region. And the length we call the hydrodynamic entrance length. After this, we call the flow as fully developed or hydrodynamically fully developed region. The velocity in the fully developed region is parabolic in case of laminar flow and bit flatter when in case of the turbulent flow because of the presence of eddies in the radial direction. So it is parabolic in case of laminar flow in the fully developed region. Otherwise, the flow would be developing like this. We have seen this kind of velocity profile, that here that would be flatter and then this kind of a thing until it reaches the fully developed part. Okay, now consider the similar kind of development when a fluid is entering. Okay, now the surface of the tube or a pipe is of at a different temperature than the fluid temperature. Okay, so in this case also, fluid particles that comes in the contact with the wall or the surface will assume the surface temperature, and that initiates the convection heat transfer in the tube and the development of thermal boundary layer. And this thickness, similar to the hydrodynamic boundary layer, would increase in the flow direction until it reaches the tube center and try to fill the center. Try to fill the whole tube. But then again, from the other wall, the similar development happens and it coincides at a certain point. So in case of thermal boundary layer, okay, similar to the hydrodynamic entrance length, we have the thermal entrance region and thermal entry length. Fine. And after the point, we will have thermally fully developed region. So we have hydrodynamically fully developed flow and thermally fully developed flow after a certain length from the entrance. So when these two happens together, okay, we call that flow consolidatedly is a fully developed flow. Okay, so in the case of fully developed flow, it has to be thermally fully developed as well as hydrodynamically fully developed. Now, in case of hydrodynamically fully developed flow, mathematically speaking, what happens? The V with respect to X in the direction is 0. That means velocity is only a function of R. In case of thermally fully developed flow, the constant is that in this, if you remember that ratio, that surface minus the temperature at any point, which is again a function of not only R and A, but also at A. Is equals to 0, where Tm is the mean temperature along the X direction. Now, again, remember that the velocity profile remained unchanged in the hydrodynamically developed region or hydrodynamically fully developed region. If the velocity profile remained constant, that means the friction factor also remained constant. Okay, and now in the thermally developed region, remember this T mean actually changing, but this normalized parameter or this dimensionless temperature would remain constant. Okay, so that means if we go by the same argument that like as the velocity profile remain constant, so the friction factor is similarly the heat transfer coefficient in the thermally fully developed region is also having a constant value. Okay, any question? So the surface heat flux, okay, the surface heat flux that we can calculate is basically the local convective heat transfer coefficient Ts minus Tm. is equals to K del T by del R at R is equals to capital R. So from here, we can write this Hx, the local convective heat transfer coefficient, is basically T by del R at R is equals to R divided by Ts minus Tm. And this is independent in the direction X. So the bottom line is that the local heat transfer, local convective heat transfer coefficient will not vary with X in the thermally fully developed region and would remain a constant value. But the temperature profile in the thermally fully developed region can vary in the direction of X. Is there any question?
So what was the reason you gave for Hx to be constant?
Because Hx is this one.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and now say if you find out that the derivative, say this derivative that we had, this was the constant for the fully developed region. Now say we do the derivative of this thing Ts minus Tm, okay, with respect to R at R is equals to capital R. What will happen? It is basically del T by del R at R is equals to capital R divided by Ts minus Tm. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Which is in fact is not a function of f of x.
But Tm is a function of x. Tm is a function of x.
See here we have the derivative of Ts minus T divided by Ts minus Tm. Okay, so here Ts minus Tm at R is equals to R at a particular radial position. At a particular radial position, Tm is constant value. The differentiation
That is with respect to R,
del.
but if we will move along the length of the pipe, then it is not constant. It is with respect to R only.
So that derivative would then be with respect to del by del x. And in that case, this ratio is constant. along the X, Tm is varying. That is true. And that is why this ratio is 0, this normalized temperature. And that is why here it is mentioned Tm as a function of X.
Yes, sir.
But here, at a particular radial position, at a cross section, consider. Okay, so this complete function is not anymore related with A, basically. And that is why this same function has been achieved in case of Hx.
Yes, sir.
Which is independent of X. Or say you can think of this in very layman's language, that since we are mentioning it as a local convective heat transfer coefficient, okay, that local means a local around a cross section or on a cross section. So Hx here, where this is say Hx1, this is Hx2. The point is the Hx1 and Hx2 are same in the case of fully developed region. It doesn't vary along the X.
So the local and the average both are same then.
Yes. So the temperature profile in the thermally fully developed region can change, but not the velocity profile.
Yes, sir.
The velocity profile in the fully developed hydrodynamic region is identical, it's same, but the temperature profile may change along the flow direction in the fully developed region, or thermally fully developed region. Now, the question again remains or appears that which boundary layer would be development would be much faster, or which one would be thicker or thinner. So for example, if I consider, or if I say that this is my thermal boundary layer, and someone says that now I have also the velocity boundary layer, okay, so whether that would be faster reaching or later than the thermal boundary layer cases. How do we know that, or how do we understand that? There again, we apply the same principle or the same understanding of the Prandtl number. If Prandtl number is nearly 1, that is the cases of several gases, these two boundary layers essentially coincide. These two boundary layers are identical. But when Prandtl number is much greater than 1, that is the case of usually for any liquid, such as say oil and other cases, then the velocity boundary layer quickly grows than the thermal boundary layer. And the hydrodynamic entrance length is much shorter than the your thermal boundary layer or thermal entrance length. Okay, so if I say the length, this length as T, LT, and this is say LH. LH, H stands for the hydrodynamic, is less smaller than the thermal entrance length. Which means, in other words, when Prandtl number is much lesser than 1, or say the lesser than 1, the examples are the liquid metals. The opposite thing happens. That means the thermal boundary layer grows quickly than the hydrodynamic boundary layer, and thermal boundary layer, thermal entrance length is much shorter of the entry length for the thermal boundary layer. This thing becomes much smaller than the velocity or a hydrodynamic entry length. Any question?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, this hydrodynamic entry length, okay, is usually so how do we measure that? How much there will be? How much length we have to spare in order the flow to be developed, or the flow to be called as fully developed flow? Do you remember that value, or that relation, or that equation for laminar flow? Say? Or how do we estimate this length, that when it coincides, this length from the entrance? This LT and LH that I was talking about. Usually what happens, how do we estimate? So the concept of boundary layer, if you remember, particularly the velocity boundary layer, we considered that 99% the velocity of the velocity value of the fluid in the boundary layer would be, say, 0.99 times of the free stream velocity, or 99% of the free stream velocity. Till that region, we call that as a boundary layer, the velocity boundary layer. So similar to that idea, the hydrodynamic entry length we typically define where the friction coefficient reaches, say, around 2% of the fully developed flow, within, not 2%, within 2%, which is, that means that is 0.98 times the friction that could have been in the fully developed value. So the distance from the entrance to the length where the friction coefficient reaches within the 2% of the fully developed flow value. So in laminar flow, this hydrodynamic and the thermal boundary layer relation that has been proposed by the scientists and works pretty well is that the H stands for the hydrodynamic cases. This laminar flow, okay? It is nearly 0.05 RE times D. The reason of writing this is quite interesting. That RE also contains the diameter, and then again why we are writing D. Let me finish writing this thing. So now T stands for the thermal boundary layer, and it is D. That means the Prandtl number times LH laminar. Yeah. So here, this relation is quite interesting because now you see that if the Reynolds number is 20, the hydrodynamic entry length is about the same as that of, instead of writing exactly equals, it's numerically equals, that reaches, that is actually the size of the pipe, or the size of the diameter of the pipe. And it increases linearly with the velocity. So in the range, so till the extreme of laminar condition, which is say 2300, okay, so it is the reason that D is explicitly written, it becomes now easier for us to understand that how much of the tube diameter is the entrance length. So it is of the same dimension if the Reynolds number is 20. So in the extreme range of the laminar condition, that is 2300, this is becoming 115 times of the D if the RE is 2300. So as you increase the Reynolds number, the portion, the entry length increases linearly, and you have to spare more and more length, after which you can consider the flow to be fully developed. And those mathematical conditions or those mathematical expressions can be applied, that the velocity profile is not changing further. In case of turbulent flow, now this is simply for the case of this thermal entry length, we have seen that this is simply, we have to multiply that with the Prandtl number and we get that value for the entrance length. And that is why if you have a gas phase where Prandtl number is 1, the length of the entry for thermal case and the hydrodynamic case is identical. Okay, so Prandtl number is basically the ratio of thermal to hydrodynamic entry length. By this way, you can also understand the importance of Prandtl number. Because this is a relation, remember, this is not that exact expression. Fine. Now, in case of turbulent flow, there is intense mixing due to the random fluctuations, inherent fluctuations that happen. Okay, so that is why there usually the hydrodynamic and thermal boundary entrance length or entry length are about the same size and usually independent of Prandtl number. Because of this intense mixing, inherently that happens when the fluid approaches or which comes with the turbulent velocity. And it is independent of Prandtl number in case of turbulent flows. So the friction factor and heat transfer coefficient both remain constant in fully developed laminar or turbulent flow. Okay, friction factor and heat transfer coefficient remain constant in case of fully developed laminar or turbulent flow because the velocity is not changing and the normalized temperature profile. Normalized temperature means this ratio, remember, is not further changing in the direction of flow. There has been again relations that has been proposed for LH turbulent cases, and that is in the range of to the power 1/4. So you can see that hydrodynamic entry length is much shorter in case of turbulent length or turbulent flow, which is quite expected. And its dependence on the Reynolds number is much weaker. Here we have the indices 1 index. Here it is 1/4. So the dependence on the Reynolds number is much weaker once we cross the Reynolds number value 10,000. That is in the turbulent region for the internal flow. So typical, if you just replace the value to test those, okay, if you have Reynolds number is 10,000, this expression gives an estimation that LH would be in the range of say 11 times of the diameter. And if you increase the Reynolds number to 10 to the power 5, this hardly goes to 43 times of the diameter. So practically, okay, because we are the engineers, we had to have some practical expectations or practical guess or practical assumption that how much we should consider the entrance or the entry effect in case of turbulent flows. And that led typically during design problems, we consider that LH turbulent is equals to LT, which is the thermal entry length for the turbulent, is again not particularly equal. It is close to 10 times of the diameter. This is an approximate value or approximate case that are typically taken in order to consider the entrance effect or the entry effect either for hydrodynamic or thermal boundary layer. Okay, so the Nusselt number and subsequently the convective heat transfer coefficient is much high, let's say much higher in the entrance region then it reaches say a constant value for turbulent flows. Now these constant values are reached. So the point is there, if you had a graph like this, that this is my x by d and this is my Nusselt number. Okay, either it's based on the thermal and the hydrodynamic. Okay, so we will come to that, why these variations are here. One is for the constant surface temperature, that is when the surface temperature is constant of the pipe, and in other case when we have constant heat flux condition. So in both the cases, what has been seen that this kind of profile exists, that this is still the entrance position, whatever. This kind of profile exists. Okay, now this varies for different Reynolds number range. So these different lines are for the different Reynolds number, but the profile typically remains same. And this is the length after which the value becomes a kind of a constant value, which is the 10 times of the diameter. So any question till this point? Okay, so now consider again a phenomena that how much heat is being transferred or the rate of heat transfer when the situation is we have a pipe, the surface of this pipe or this pipe is kept at a constant temperature, which is say Ts. That is, we call the condition of constant surface temperature. This is a constant value. So we can always write that this is the amount of heat is being transferred, that is HAS, and an average value, delta T average, because the fluid is at a different temperature, say TF or TI, that is coming in. So H is the average heat transfer coefficient or average convection heat transfer coefficient. AS is the heat transfer area for a circular pipe. It is pi dl, where L is the length of the pipe, or say I write capital L. And this is basically some appropriate temperature difference, or say the average temperature difference between the fluid and the surface, because the fluid temperature is changing along the length. The surface is at a fixed temperature. Okay, so Ti, and say at the exit there is a T exit temperature. So now if you remember, in the last class we did some arithmetic average. We initially started that, okay, the logical assumption is that we take an arithmetic mean of the temperature difference, and then I told you that this is not correct, it would over predict the heat transfer rate, and we introduced a term called the LMTD, the log mean temperature difference. Okay, so let's go ahead with the calculation that we did, say the arithmetic mean. So say we focus now that what could have been the proper average. The del T average, say we go ahead with considering now there is a temperature difference between the Ti, the inlet fluid temperature, and Ts. So we see, say, right, this temperature difference, which is say del Ti. Agreed? And there is another temperature difference at the exit. We say this is del Te. Here, the Ts minus Te. And the arithmetic average means these two differences plus we add those divided by 2. Fine. Which means that Ts minus Ti plus Te divided by 2. The del T average. This is further simplified by calling that this term is the bulk temperature or bulk mean fluid temperature. That the inlet and the outlet temperature we typically know for a fluid that is flowing inside a pipe, and we take the arithmetic mean of those two temperatures, and this is we call, say, the bulk mean fluid temperature, which is the arithmetic average of mean fluid temperature at the inlet and the exit. Okay, agreed? Any issue?
No, sir.
Okay, okay. So now that means you consider, or you can see from this expression, that this arithmetic mean average, which we can also write if you follow these two terms, is basically del Ti plus del Te divided by 2. The average of temperature differences between the surface and fluid at the exit and the inlet. Now, one inherent assumption in this definition is that the mean fluid temperature varies linearly along the tube. Okay, but that is not the case. That doesn't happen. Okay, now why it is so? Let's look at it. So say we have a fluid element. Okay, so the fluid element looks like something this kind of a scenario. Say we have a fluid element. And then we do the differential, the elemental analysis is that CPT mean dot CPT mean plus del T mean. This is the surface temperature which is kept constant, because here we consider this is the T mean, and this side we have Tm plus dTm. Now here we have delta Q dot, which is H Ts minus Tm having through an area which is dA. This is the dx. Okay, so now consider again the surface is at constant temperature. There is no other external energy that has been is being given or something is being lost. So energy balance across this differential control volume, what we can write? We write that as Cp delta Tm is equals to H Ts minus Tm TAS, which is the increase in the energy of the fluid is equal to the heat transferred to the fluid from the tube surface by convection. Okay, now this differential area is basically perimeter multiplied by dx, the perimeter of the tube multiplied by dx. Okay, and this thing, since we have our Ts as constant, we can think of it in this way. Okay, so now if we rearrange this expression with these two substitutions, okay, what we write, look at the left hand side, and then from the right hand side, this part we write at the denominator is equals to minus that comes from here H, the perimeter P that comes from the AS dx divided by m dot Cp multiplied by dx.
So why there is a negative sign?
Which one?
dTm is equals to minus d ts
Yeah,
minus
because
t.
TS is constant. It is forcefully introduced just to have this kind of a format. TS
Okay,
is
sir.
constant value.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so essentially it is DTM. It is
Yes.
forcefully introduced because we have a term here which is TS minus TM.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now we integrate it from x is equals to 0 to x is equals to L for the complete length of the pipe. Now at x is equals to 0, the condition that is Tm is essentially T inlet. And at x is equals to L, Tm is equals to T exit. Fine. So we integrate it over 0 to L. Sorry, this one is over 0 to L. Okay. And here from Ti to Te. We simplify it. What we have T minus Tm divided by Ts minus not Tm would be replaced here. So we have E by I. Provided the fluid properties remain constant in that temperature range. And H is now we have a constant average convection heat transfer coefficient. So which means the T exit temperature is basically Ts minus Ts minus Ti and exponential of minus HAS divided by m dot Cp. So the mean fluid temperature at the tube exit we can calculate from this expression. And also, not only that, in case or in place of E, if you write it in this form, that any mean temperature at any point, okay, is basically Ts minus Ti exp minus Ha PL instead of AS, which is for a length, we say the perimeter multiplied by the A. It can be written as Px m dot Cp. So the mean temperature at any x, at any given x, the mean temperature can easily be calculated for this kind of problem where we have a constant surface temperature. What it means graphically, if you try to plot this relation, okay, that you have a flow of fluid through a length that is capital L, where the Ts is equals to constant value. So along the length, your temperature, say Ti, and if this is your Ts, which is constant throughout the length, okay, this is exponentially decaying. Okay, the rate of decay is actually depends on the magnitude of this parameter. This parameter is called number of transfer unit, or NTU, the number of transfer units. This actually provides a measure of effectiveness of heat transfer process or the heat transfer system by which you are trying to enhance the heat transfer. We are coming to that. So if you try to plot this expression in this graph along the length, what you would see that depending on the magnitude of this number of transfer unit, the plot would be like something like this. This difference is basically del Te, and this difference is basically del Ti. So the point that I tried to mention just a couple of minutes ago, that this increase is not linear. And that is why arithmetic average of these two temperature difference, this one and this one, would not give you accurate result in estimating the mean temperature. Because this profile is not linear. So here, the boundedness of the problem is that this temperature of the fluid would never cross the surface temperature. That's unphysical also. Okay, it can be at the max, it can be almost equal to the surface temperature. Now coming to that, for that, you possibly have to give an infinite length of the pipe or the tube. And once you increase the infinite length, that means that changes the numerator value of P, because P is associated with the length, which means you are increasing the number of transfer unit. And here your controlling function is the length. Fine.
So how is P associated with length? It is perimeter.
And with X, so basically here, the P and X. So either you have the opportunity of changing the dimension of the, say, radius or the diameter or the insulation, whatever the one you want it to increase or decrease. and the X. This AS actually increases with the length or along the flow direction.
Yes, sir.
So in order to increase the heat transfer rate or heat transfer, the amount of heat being transferred, you have to control this number of transfer units. If these properties are fixed, the temperature are given, that say during design it has been given that these are the fixed temperature. You cannot play with those temperatures, but then how do you enhance the heat transfer rate? Or how do you play with the heat transfer rate? Okay, so and it has been seen that it would not infinitely increase. That if you increase the NTU, say for about 5, okay, that there you would see that it reaches a limit, after which even if you extend the length of the tube, the heat transfer rate is not improving further because of this exponential factor. So say numerically speaking, let me cite the example. Say if you have say this tube that is already drawn here. If I give you some realistic number, say Ti in this case is 20 degrees centigrade. Surface temperature is say 100 degrees centigrade. Okay, it is flowing at a rate m dot and it has a capacity mcp. Here we have a Te. Area is As and heat transfer coefficient is H. So NTU is essentially HAS by m dot Cp. And corresponding to that, say we are estimating the T exit. So when this whole value is 0.01, for this problem, if we just replace the numeric, we see that the outlet temperature is 20.8. So from 20, it is increased to 20.8 for a problem where the surface temperature is kept at 100 degrees centigrade. For NTU, 10 times higher, 0.1, the value would be around 27.6. When further 10 times, it is 1, we see that this value is around 70.6. So you see the drastic increase in the exit temperature or the heat transfer rate for this system when NTU is significantly increased. But then at NTU 5, you have a temperature that reaches 99.5 or 6 degrees Celsius. Okay, and exactly at 10, you have the 100 degrees Celsius. So practically speaking, after a certain NTU value, the temperature would hardly improve, or the heat transfer, the amount of heat transfer would hardly change. And that is why, that is where you have to think of a way to improve the NTU instead of increasing or changing the L value, the length, because you cannot infinitely change its length. Large NTU means large heat transfer area, surface area, which is desirable for the heat transfer point of view. But from an economic standpoint, that is not feasible. When you have to design a compact heat exchanger, you cannot have a infinitely long heat pipe, a pipe or tube. So the selection of heat transfer equipment becomes important, and that's why we'll take up those issues later. But coming to this point that we have here is that, yeah, so here what we have, this relation, this ln, this normalized temperature is equals to minus NTU. Okay, so if we solve it for m dot Cp, so this relation, now if we write for m dot Cp, we basically write ln, this is the same thing, that Ts minus Te divided by Ts minus Ti. With a minus sign here, we cannot neglect that. And then we have Q is equals to HA delta T, that here we say that average 1. If you remember, this is where we started. We said that we had to find an average, T average. Okay, and in case, say, we have the overall heat transfer, this we can always write I minus in minus I. Sorry, this is in other way. We write this, the same expression is m dot Cp I minus E. Isn't it? So this m dot Cp is now replaced here, which gives us, after rearranging this thing, if we replace it here, this is AS divided by ln Ts minus Te divided by Ts minus Ti. Ti minus Te. So what we finally have is that HAS delta T average is equals to minus HAS. Okay. So, sorry, this Cp would not be there because we are replacing the m dot Cp term altogether. which is del T average, okay, is basically the ratio that we had if now this term goes, this becomes is what we call the del T LMTD, the expression that we have seen earlier. So this is what the logarithmic mean temperature difference that we had introduced earlier, and now we have seen its derivation, that how it appears or how it gives us the more logical solution. Any question?
No, sir.
In fact, let me rewrite this numerator with another expression that would be more convenient to you for you to understand. Is that we have a negative sign here, right? I mean, we had that. It eliminated during. So the basically, let me write for this complete thing that LMTD is basically Ti minus Te is Lm. So Ts minus Te divided by Ts minus Ti. So here, if we introduce, say, Ts minus Ti, okay, and this has to be, say, we had to have minus of this plus Ts minus Te in order to write it in the form that is here we have del Te divided by del Ti. So that we can write it here that del Te minus del Ti divided by ln del Te by del Ti. So the temperature difference at the exit, temperature difference in the inlet, and its logarithmic ratio. So that is why the use of arithmetic temperature should be avoided, and logarithmic temperature difference should always be used in case of the problem where we have constant surface temperature. It gives nearly exact representation of the average temperature difference that is happening throughout the system for constant surface temperature cases. And typically what happens that this the local temperature difference, it also shows that there is a logarithmic variation. It's an exponential decay of the local temperature difference. Okay, and this thing works pretty well, very accurate expression of what is happening there. Until and unless there is a drastic difference, okay, then this del Te and del Ti, undesirable say level of difference. The bottom line is that we should always use LMTD for determining convective heat transfer rate or the amount in a tube whose surface is maintained at a constant temperature. So I will stop here today, and in the next class we will take up the similar problem, but there our surface temperature may vary, but there would be a constant heat flux in the pipe. So there are the two different conditions. One of this is the surface temperature constant. In other case, there can be a constant surface heat flux. For example, you consider there is a tube wrapped with an electrical coil that is supplying a constant amount of heat flux throughout the flow. But then again, their surface temperature may change because the fluid is flowing and the heat transfer is happening. So we'll come to that in the next class. So if you do not have any question, thank you. If you have any question, feel free to ask.